Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel, and in this video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous 12 hours. We have lots of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about another massive missile and drone strike that was carried out by the Russians. According to information we have, during the previous night the Russians used hundreds of drones and tens of missiles to attack the capital of Ukraine, the city of Kyiv. In front of your screens you can see the roads of approximate roads of Russian attacks, and as you can see most of them are heading towards the city of Kyiv, once again the capital of Ukraine. The independent resources reported that during the previous night the Russians used around 80 drones and up to 6 missiles, 4 Iskander-M missiles and 2 Iskander-K missiles to attack the city of Kyiv. The official Ukrainian channels provide us completely different situation. The Ukrainians are saying that the Russians used 315 drones, so as you can see almost 4 times more drones in comparison with the independent information and independent resources, and the Ukrainians managed to destroy 277 drones out of those 315 that were sent by the Russians. Furthermore, the Ukrainians, the official Ukrainian channels reported that the Russians used 7 missiles and every single missile was destroyed by the Ukraine air defense. This is the official information provided by the Ukrainians, and of course we can see a very huge gap between the independent information that was provided by independent resources and by information that was provided by official channels. Very interesting gap. Anyway, when talking about the real situation and the videos and photos that we got during the previous nights, I'm not sure whether the Russians, whether every single missile of the Russian Federation was destroyed, because during the previous night we got lots of proofs and lots of videos how the Russians were bombing and attacking the city of Kyiv from many directions using different types of weapon. We saw lots of videos with consequences of Russian attacks, lots of buildings were damaged, and the most important, we have proofs that there was a very huge fire in the city of Kyiv, and according to information we have, the Russians managed to destroy probably some ammo depot or production facility that the Ukrainians used to produce drones. Another important detail that we got right before we started making this video, according to information we have, the Russians attacked the visa center of the United Kingdom. This visa center of the United Kingdom doesn't work anymore. This visa center used to work before the beginning of the special military operation, and according to information we have, today Ukraine used this visa center for probably special forces from the United Kingdom or for production of drones, and as you can see this building was destroyed. Anyway, something huge was damaged by the Russians. We are waiting for additional report from the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation, and then most likely they will give us additional details about this attack. During the previous night, once again, we have a lot of photos, a lot of videos. Huge fire took place in Kyiv, and this situation is very difficult for Ukraine because every single day the Russians are using dozens and hundreds of drones and missiles to attack Ukraine, and we understand that the Ukrainians have no possibilities to use the same amount of air defense missiles. Another important article was published today by the Russian sources about these drones, about Russia's Giran drones. According to information we have, Russia is resuming direct rail service with the DPRK, which was suspended in February 2020 due to the pandemic, Russian Railways reported. From June 17th, trains between Pyongyang and Moscow will run twice a month, and from June 19th, a road between Pyongyang and Khabarovsk will open once a month. The Pyongyang-Moscow road remains the longest direct rail road in the world. The distance between the capitals exceeds 10,000 kilometers, and the journey takes about 8 days. But obviously this article is not about journey about 10 days, and this article is about Russian further plans regarding their expansion of production of drones and military weapon equipment and arms. I'd remind you that several months ago we got another report that the Russians managed to improve their logistics between DPRK and the Russian Federation along the river of Tyumen. So the Russians are saying that they managed to build another bridge, or they finished the production of another bridge. This is the road IN6 in the vicinity of the settlement by the name of Hassan from the Russian side, and this allowed the Russians to improve their logistics. Furthermore, we got report that the Russians are going to expand their production of drones on the territory of DPRK. for many reasons. The first one is logistic reason. Currently, China sends lots of parts, lots of equipment to the Russian Federation, let's say to the city of Kazan, and of course it takes time, and you need to use aircrafts for these purposes. And the most important, countries in the world like Western countries, NATO countries, can control this probably logistic and see and can calculate the exact number of drones that the Russians are able to produce after another Chinese supply. But now we understand that China is going to send weapons, send arms, send parts and different equipment to the territory of DPRK. On the territory of DPRK, the Russians will produce drones, and then using railways, the Russians are going to get these drones to the territory of the Russian Federation and to the area of the special military operation. And according to information we have, the Russians are planning to probably establish production of drones on the territory of DPRK, which will allow the Russians to produce additional 1,000 drones per month. Currently, according to information we have, Russia on the territory of Kazan can produce up to 500 drones a month, and now they're going to triple this number, and they're going to produce 1,000 drones on the territory of north of DPRK, and probably the Russians will improve their production on the territory of the Russian Federation itself. So summarizing everything, very likely that by the end of 2026 the Russians will be able to produce up to 2,000 drones per month, and this is going to be complete disaster, not just for Ukraine, and everybody understand this. So this is the situation. Now let's discuss the situation on the ground, and first let's talk about the Sumi direction. According to information we have, the Russians continue their offensive operation in the direction of the settlement of Sumi, the capital of this oblast, and during the previous 24 hours the Russians managed to improve their positions. First, the Russians, according to information we have, established complete FPV drone control over the main supply lines between the city of Sumi and the north and the first defense layer. In this video, for example, on this map we can see lots of icons between the settlements of Khotin and Pisarevka. This is the video we're talking about. This video was published by the Russian sources, and in this video we can see how Russians were attacking equipment, vehicles, positions, cars, trucks, buildings, soldiers, armored vehicles, tanks in this area between the settlements of Khotin, Pisarevka and the city of Sumi. Lots of attacks. The Russians established complete control over this territory, and telling the truth, we believe that Ukrainians lost any possibilities to redeploy their units along N07 road in the direction of the first defense layer. So this road is no longer safe and secured for Ukrainians. Ukrainians basically can't use this road for different operations. Now the Ukrainians have just one possibility, to go through the Sumi forest, but for some reason the Ukrainians are not using these roads. We don't know for sure why exactly. Furthermore, according to information we have, the Russians managed to improve their position significantly in the vicinity of the settlement by the name of Yunakievka, and the most important, this information was confirmed by pro-Ukrainian resources, and according to them, the Russians managed to cut N07 road and basically to outflank the settlement of Yunakievka from the west. So this is exactly what the Russians managed to managed to do during the previous 24 hours, and let's compare the maps between the dates. So right in front of your screens you can see the situation by the end of the 9th of June of 2025. The settlement of Yunakievka was under complete Ukraine control, almost under complete control, and now we had reports that the Russians managed to outflank the settlement and to cut supply and support from the west and the southwest. Now the Ukrainians have possibilities to supply their forces in the area of Yunakievka just using this tree line in the direction of the settlement of Marina. So this is the only road left for the Ukrainians. But I'll remind you that during the previous days, we got lots of reports that the Russians were trying to outflank and to attack the settlement of Sadki and the village of Yunakievka from the southeast. We are waiting for additional details during the next 24 hours, and obviously something huge might happen, and most likely the Battle of Yunakievka is about to be finished. Obviously, we're not talking about days or hours, but obviously 1 week probably, or 2 weeks, and the village will be taken by the Russians completely. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the South Donetsk and the Dnipro directions, because during the previous night we got lots of very important updates from this area. And first let's talk about the settlement of Nikolaevka. During the previous night, the pro-Ukrainian resources published this video, how Ukrainians were attacking Russians, how the Russians were attacking Ukrainian positions. Now you know that now the Russians began using motorcycles massively. And this is very interesting tactics, because you know that Ukrainians have no possibilities to keep lots of forces along the line of combat contact. Usually the Ukrainians keep just several soldiers, few groups along the line of combat contact, and the main forces are located several kilometers from the line of combat contact. And when Ukrainians see the movement of the Russian forces, the Ukrainians usually send reinforcements and reserves with the purpose to stabilize the situation. But now the Russians began using motorcycles, and usually Russian motorcycles have possibilities to bypass or to outflank or to move through the edge positions of the armored forces of Ukraine, to block the main supply lines, and then with the regular army to clear another defense layer of the armored forces of Ukraine. So this is the tactics of the Russians. The Russians use these tactics in the area of Novomikhailov, and we got video proof of this. The Russians several days ago used the same tactics in the vicinity of Alexandra Kalinova. First, motorcycles using very high speed entered the village, and then the Russians began securing the territory and the gap between positions in Alexandra Kalinova in the settlement of Zarya, and the Russians used the same tactics in the northwestern part of the city of Donetsk when the Russian motorcycles entered the village of Nilipovka. Very interesting tactics, and we see that these tactics works. Anyway, let's return back. Based on this video, we have adjusted the map. We have colored everything behind a Russian motorcycle offensive operation. We don't know for sure the status of this tree line. Most likely there were Ukrainians during the Russian attack, but obviously during the next 24-48 hours, while the Russian forces are located in this part of Nikolaevka, the regular army of the Russian Federation will continue offensive operation with the purpose to secure the gap between positions. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the Novopavlovka, in the South Donetsk direction, in the Kamar area. The most important and the most interesting updates are coming from the settlement by the name of Alexeyevka. Today Russian sources published this video, and this is very important video, and in this video we can see how Russian 114th Brigade was attacking and clearing positions of the armored forces of Ukraine in the area of the settlement by the name of Alexeyevka. This video has 2.5 minutes, and in this video we can see lots of episodes of clashes for these territories, lots of episodes with Ukrainian losses, and in the most final part of this video we can see how a Russian drone was flying above the village and making video of the situation on the ground. And in the most final part of this video we can see how Russians from the 114th Brigade established different signs of their unit in different parts of the settlement of Alexeyevka. So according to this final scene, the Russians managed to establish their flags in the eastern, central and the western part of the settlement, and during the video we got those episodes, but different probably independent resources managed to gelocate just two flags. This is the area of the first flag that was raised by the Russians, and this is the area of the second flag. Based on this video we have colored completely the eastern and the central parts of the settlement of Alexeyevka, and the northern part was also colored in Russian favor according to neutral mappers. But several pro-Russian resources reported that the entire village of Alexeyevka was secured and captured by the Russians, and that the Ukrainians were forced to fall back completely. So summarizing everything, according to several resources, independent resources, pro-Russian resources, pro-Ukrainian resources and neutral mappers, the Russians by the beginning of the 10th of June of 2025 managed to establish complete control over the settlement of Alexeyevka. Today we are waiting for additional report from the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation. Maybe they will confirm this information, and if they confirm this information we will color this territory completely in Russian favor. So another stronghold of the armored forces of Ukraine was taken by the Russians, and the most important, this stronghold was taken by the Russians from the 114th Brigade, which most likely was somewhere on restoring their combat capabilities after their military trip from the city of Avdiivka in the direction of the settlement of Pokrovsk. I'll remind you that most of these settlements, villages and towns were taken by the 114th Brigade of the Armored Forces of the Russian Federation during the period of time between probably April of 2025 and probably September or October of 2024. So between April and October of 2024, the Russians managed, of 114th Brigade, managed to secure every single village in this direction. Then this brigade was sent probably to replacements to restore their combat capabilities, and now we see that the Russians returned this brigade back to the Pokrovsk and to the Dnipro direction, which means that the Russians are planning to intensify their offensive with fresh forces and with very experienced brigade, which most likely will be able to secure the rest of the Donetsk region, at least in this area. Furthermore, currently there are very heavy clashes for the settlement of Komar. The Russians during the previous 24 hours managed to improve their positions in the area. Let's compare the map between the dates. This is the situation by the end of the 9th of June, and this is the situation by the beginning. According to information we have, the Russians managed to secure these farms and these barracks in the southeastern part of the settlement. The Ukrainians are trying to stick and stay as close as possible to the river of Mokre Yali with the purpose to have enough of time to cross the river and to escape possible cauldron that the Russians are trying to create for the Ukrainians. We believe that the battle for Komar is coming to an end because we don't see any chances for the Ukrainians to hold their positions. Now let's talk about the Zaporizhzhia direction, where the Russians continue their offensive operation. During the previous night, we got additional videos how the Russians were bombing and attacking Ukrainians in this area. I would like to point your attention that the settlement of Gulai Polya is also in the area of responsibilities of the Russian Group of Forces East. So the Group of Forces East currently attacks on the line between the settlement of Gulai Polya and the settlement of Alexeyevka. So this big front line is under the responsibilities of this very experienced group of forces. And today pro-Ukrainian sources confirmed that the Russians indeed during the previous days managed to shorten the distance to the settlements and villages of Malinovka and Chervona. And according to pro-Ukrainian sources and according to their gray zone and contested area, the Russians, or the first groups of the Russian forces, managed to enter the village of Malinovka from the southeast. So according to pro-Ukrainian sources, the battle for this village has probably begun several days ago, and the Russians continue their offensive operation. This is very important village because we expect that the Russians will continue further in the northern direction towards the settlement of Uspenovka from the south and from the east, with the purpose to take this village under complete control, which will open the Russians a window of opportunities to continue offensive operation with the purpose to establish complete control over the settlement of Gulai Polya, which can lead to complete collapse of Ukrainian defense on the entire Zaporizhzhia and Dnipro directions. And that's it for the short video. A military summary channel reminds to condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.